As spring marches on, we come to the period where it's getting warmer, the days are getting longer, and you have to start transitioning to the summer crops. And in this case, I'm showing 3 different beds of green peppers. And depending on the weather, depending on the plant, sometimes you can have some sensitivity of some of your early transplants to the conditions. So in this case, if you were to kind of look very closely, it looks fairly good, but then there are some spots where we are missing some of the plants. These beds were filled with 25 plants per row, 2 rows. So in the places where you do not see any sort of plants, it's because the plant died. A lot of different circumstances that play into this. For whatever reason this year and the previous year, I'm having my first time difficulty with the peppers. They seem to be much more sensitive to the conditions that I had in previous to that, because I never had this sort of issues. And the issue that I see is that if you see a nice transplant like that, and then you look at the one that tends to die, and all the ones that have died so far have essentially looked like this, where at the stem has just kind of cut like a tree and falling over like a tree, just like that. Most likely, given that the stem is brown, it's not cutworm. I haven't seen any cutworms. I've put out the pest traps, I don't see anything. It's most likely because it hasn't been a warmer spring, it's been a wetter spring, and when I transplanted these thinking that it was going to get warmer, the seedlings tend to be much more sensitive if it's not the ideal growing conditions for these sort of transplants. So instead, they become much more sensitive then to the conditions that it doesn't like, and in this case it's most likely a fungal disease that's causing dampening off. Because you see right at the stem there's a brown stem again, it looks pinched off. In this case it pinches off and the top part of the leaves can't get any more water, it wilts and essentially falls over. So when I transplanted these without the warm weather, instead it was cold and rainy, you have a lot more of the soil that is then moist. And seedlings that are younger, that could have been more older if the weather was there, are more sensitive to these sorts of conditions. So a larger transplant or a later transplant that had more kind of legs to it would have survived this. But in this case, typically the 2 or 3 leaves that I see on there have been sufficient for me for the transplants, but I probably should have let them grow a little bit more in the soil plugs, but I didn't, and I'm paying for some of it. I'm losing about 10 to 20% of the peppers right now. Hopefully by this week we see a lot more of the warmer temperatures, so it dries out that soil and you don't have contact with the soil with the stem, and you have more contact with dry soil with the stem, so you do not support that sort of fungal growth, and you have that moist soil underneath that then will support the root. So if you are transplanting, that's great, but be aware that sometimes some plants are more susceptible depending on the weather conditions. In this case we had a moist set of weeks, cloudy, kept the soil beds nice and moist on the top, and it was ideal conditions for the dampening off to happen, and it hasn't killed fully the beds. I'm hoping it does recover on a majority, but I've probably lost between 10 to 15 plants at the moment. Hopefully that will be the least of it, and then the warmer weather will get them going. So something to be aware of when you do transplant.